Above Festive Road, which is very ordinary and happy, clouds were drifting gently. In Festive Road, things were moving not quite so gently. Children were blowing up balloons, and instead of tying the ends, they were letting the balloons go, so they rushed about until all the air was out of them. At his gate, Mr. Benn stood and watched the games. Then he looked up at the clouds. How gentle and free they look, he thought. Then he thought that it was time that he paid another visit to that special costume shop, which his adventures could start from. He started to look around the shop when, as if by magic, the shopkeeper appeared. "Good morning, sir," he said. "How nice to see you again. What would you like to try on today?" "What about this one?" said Mr. Benn. "Good," said the man. "See if it fits." And he looked towards the door of the fitting room in the corner of the shop. In the little room, Mr. Benn soon changed from his clothes into the other outfit. He stopped and admired himself in the mirror of the changing room. But not for long. He was too eager to go through the other door of the changing room, the door that would lead to... To what this time, wondered Mr. Benn. This time, Mr. Benn found he'd walked into a crowd of people. Wondering what the crowd was watching, he gradually managed to work his way to the front. There stood 6 balloons in a line. Very large, decorated balloons with baskets hanging underneath for people to stand in. The balloons had 2 men in each basket. But the one nearest to Mr. Benn had just 1 young man. So he asked the young man what was happening. "It's a balloon race," said the young man. "We're all going to race to the next town. I would love to win, but it's very difficult against a cheat." "Who cheats?" asked Mr. Benn. "Wicked Baron Bartram, the man with the tall hat in the next balloon." Mr. Benn asked why the young man was alone. "My friend suddenly had to go," said the young man. "I think Baron Bartram tricked him to make it more difficult for me." "Can I ride with you?" asked Mr. Benn. The young man was pleased, and Mr. Benn was soon in the basket of the balloon and was told how the balloon worked. "When we want to go up, we pull in the anchor. To come down, we let some of the gas out of the balloon from this tube at the bottom." Mr. Benn looked at the other balloons. Apart from the young man's and the Baron's, they all had extra bits on. One had 2 sails. The next had oars to row in the air. The third had a large kite to pull it. The fourth had a large propeller. "I couldn't afford any extra bits," said the young man. "Anyway, I don't trust Baron Bartram. I'm sure he's done something to the other balloon so that he can win." Just then, there was a shout from the man who was going to start the race. He held a pistol above his head. "What shall I do?" asked Mr. Benn. "When he fires the starting pistol, pull in the anchor rope," said the young man. "On your marks," called the starter. "Get set. Go!" Quickly, each balloon crew pulled in their anchor. Mr. Benn pulled his in. The balloon started to rise, then stopped. He looked over the side and he noticed the balloon had been tied to the drain pipe of a cottage. "I'll bet that was Baron Bartram," he said. He gave a hard tug on the rope and part of the drain pipe came up with the rope. "We'll return it later," said Mr. Benn. "It was the Baron, all right. Look at the other balloons. He's tried to stop us all." The first had lost one of its sails, and the balloon was spinning around in circles. On the second, Baron Bartram must have covered the oars with birdseed. The oars were lined with birds, so many that the balloon was weighed down by them. The kite was pulling the next one more up than along, and the balloon was vanishing into the clouds. On the fourth, Bartram must have turned the propeller back to front. The balloon shot off at speed, but in the wrong direction. Baron Bartram, grinning and waving, was drifting on his way. He became a bit annoyed when he saw that the young man was not so far behind as he'd expected him to be. The two balloons drifted on. The crowds were left behind and they passed over open country. Slowly, they caught up Baron Bartram's balloon and then passed it. Mr. Benn loved the gentle movement. This, he thought, is how the clouds must feel. They passed over a small wood and then noticed that as Bartram was about to cross it, he lowered a rope. The man with Bartram raised a horn to his mouth and gave a blast on it. From out of the woods galloped a horse and rider. The rider grabbed the end of the rope and tied it to the saddle. Once the rope was fixed, the horse galloped off, pulling the balloon at a much faster pace. The young man and Mr. Benn had gone well ahead, but now they were being caught up again. As Bartram passed, he gave a wicked grin and called, "Bad luck, but you don't really think I'd let you win, do you?" The young man watched Bartram get ahead and said, "There's nothing we can do now." "Perhaps there is," said Mr. Benn, and he picked up the piece of drain pipe that had snapped off at the start of the race. He fixed one end of the pipe against the place where the gas could be let out and pointed the other end behind them. Some gas was let out, and the balloon shot forward and then slowed again. "Again," said Mr. Benn. "The only thing is," said the young man, "as the gas is let out, we will go down as well as along. We've nearly caught them. Keep trying." An extra strong blast from the balloon sent it rushing along, but getting lower. They shot past the Baron and gave the horse a fright. It reared in the air, threw off the rider, and then rushed away, taking Baron Bartram's balloon in the wrong direction. Their troubles were over. The balloon was quite low, but it drifted along just above the trees. Finally, with a gentle bump, it landed at the finishing post to win the race. The crowd cheered loudly. The mayor presented the young man with a gold cup and the prize money. And then he looked for the medal for Mr. Benn for helping. "I must have left it inside," he said. A man suddenly appeared beside Mr. Benn. I'll take you inside to get it. This way, sir. Mr. Benn stepped through the door and at once recognized the changing room of the shop. There were his own clothes. He took a last look at himself in the mirror and changed. Back in the shop, he gave back the clothes. "Thank you, sir," said the shopkeeper. And then smiling, "I believe this is yours." And he held out a medal to Mr. Benn. Mr. Benn was delighted. At the door, he waved and said, "Thank you. See you soon." Mr. Benn was quite happy to be back in Festive Road with his feet on the ground. The boys were still playing with balloons, which now were tied up and just drifting. At his door, Mr. Benn took another look at the medal. It had a picture of a balloon with a large number 1 on it. "I'll keep it with my other souvenirs," he said. "It'll help me remember."